Hello, Friends in Fiction Official Book Club members. Welcome to our March book club. We have, oh my gosh, you guys, we are so excited for tonight. So, our book club, we are going to be discussing this amazing novel, The House of Eve, with Sadeqa Johnson. And I know I feel the vibrations from you guys all day. So, I'm going to kick it off to my beautiful co-host, Brenda, and she can introduce our special guest.
Thank you, Lisa. I am equally excited. So I'm just so pleased to introduce our author of this month's read, The House of Eve. Originally from Philadelphia, Sadeqa Johnson, a former PR manager, spent several years working with well-known authors such as J.K. Rowling, Amy Tan, and Bishop T.D. Jakes before becoming an author herself. She's a New York Times bestselling author of 5 novels and the recipient of the National Book Club Award, the Phyllis Wheatley Award, and the USA Best Book Award for Best Fiction. Her novels have also received starred reviews from Kirkus and Library Journal. She teaches for the MFA program at Drexel University and is writing mentor for Story Summit. Her most recent novel, The House of Eve, was an instant New York Times bestseller, and it was selected by Reese's Book Club as a February 2023 pick. And we're excited to have her here to discuss The House of Eve. Welcome, Sadeqa.
Well, hello. Yay. Hi, everyone. Thank you guys so much for having me. I'm so grateful that you all picked The House of Eve for your March book club pick. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Sadeqa. We can't wait to dig into The House of Eve. So book club members who are watching, be sure to put questions for Sadeqa in the chat. And as you may recall, we're spoiler free until 7:15, but after that, the gloves are off. So we get to go into all kinds of details of this fabulous story set in the 1950s. You know, Sadeqa, the thing about this book for me, it's about 2 women, but it's really about a tapestry of women. It's about Ruby and Eleanor, but it's about Ruby's aunt and her mother and the Mrs. Porter, who was a mentor. There's just so much depth to this story.
Yeah.
So we would love to hear you give a summary just for those, in case there are some folks who haven't read it yet. Could you give us a little summary, and then they can just turn off after 7:15 if they don't want to hear the spoilers?
Okay. Well, The House of Eve, it's my 5th novel. It's my 2nd historical. It's set in the 1950s. It's the story of Ruby and Eleanor. So Ruby is a 15-year-old girl. She's smart. She's ambitious. She's on track to becoming the first in her family to be college educated. But she falls for a very unlikely boy, the son of her landlord, a white Jewish boy, and that relationship threatens to upend everything that she has worked so hard to achieve. And then we have Eleanor, who hails from the Midwest, and she stepped foot on Howard University's campus and falls for another boy who is very unlikely for her. He hails from one of the most wealthiest Black families in Washington, D.C. They don't just let anyone into their fold. And so Eleanor has to make some very difficult choices to see how she can make herself fit. And these 2 characters meet in a very unexpected way. And there's this thing at the middle of the book that holds it all together. And that is The House of Eve. Did I leave anything out?
Yes, it is.
Well, we can dig into some of those details in just a few minutes. And we have a lot of detail. The chat is exploding with hearts and questions. Nancy Swanson says, loved this story. Well, I'll read some of these. Some of these are coming through spoilers already, but our members are super excited. But one question we wanted to ask you is, how did you find out that you were selected for Reese Witherspoon's book club, and how hard was it to keep that a secret?
Well, I have to take it back to like May of last year. because I
Oh,
was doing a
wow.
draft. Yeah, I was doing a draft and I turned it in. I made my deadline. And then, like a week later, I was preparing to go on vacation. My husband and I made 20 years marriage last year. And
Oh,
so we had
congratulations.
Thank
Congratulations.
you. Thank you. So we had planned to go to Turks and Caicos, and we were going to have a week, just the two of us. And so my editor emails me back and says, "Hey, do you think that you can turn in this next draft like in 2 weeks? I know you're about to go on vacation, but we have some interest from some of the celebrity book clubs." She didn't say which one. And she said, "But we promised we would get it to them by this date," which meant that I would have to work on my vacation. And so I was like, oh, all right, sure, I'll do it, because that's what we do, right? That's what writers do. We say, all right, sure, we'll get it done. So I turn it in, I make that next deadline. I woke up every day an hour, 2 hours earlier than my husband. I wrote in the morning, and then we still had our little vacation. And I would say, I forgot about it. Like, I went on with my life, and end of September, early October, my editor calls and she says, "Hey, could you pop on a Zoom really quickly?" And I'm like, okay. And I'm like in my little ratty t-shirt, hair bigger and all over my head. But I'm like, all right, I'm not going to fix myself up. I'll just jump on the call. So I jump on the call, and it's like, oh, these people from Simon and Schuster on the call. My agents are on the call. And I'm like, what is going on? And so she
Just a
says,
little
"We want
heads
to
up
let..."
would have been nice.
Right. Sadeqa, look a little cute because we're going to record this, right? But no, no heads
Oh
up.
my gosh.
So she's like, "We just wanted to tell you that the House of Eve was selected by Reese Witherspoon's book club." And I'm just like, and she's like, "But the only caveat at the time, the House of Eve was a March 7th pub. The only caveat is that we need to move the book to February." And I'm like, that is not a caveat. I was like,
Yeah.
Reese could have whatever she wants. So that was that. And they were like, "Go get your husband. Is he home?" So I went and got him, and we told him. So he's on video, like all excited. And they were like, "All right, you can't tell anybody else. Like, this is it. You got to hold this secret." And it was fine. It wasn't too hard to hold, I have to say, because I know the people in my family can't hold water. If I told my parents, the whole city of Philadelphia would have known. So it wasn't too hard to keep the secret.
That's
Oh,
such a
that's
great
too funny.
story.
Oh my goodness. Well, Sadeqa, could we ask you, we had a question, an advanced question from one of our readers, Joyce Barakas, who said, "I enjoyed The Yellow Wife and can't wait to read The House of Eve." This was last week. What or who has inspired you to write?
Wow. Well, I started off as wanting to be an actress. I would say that was my first thought of what my career was going to be. When I was a little girl growing up in Philadelphia, I was like, I want to be on TV. I want to be on Broadway. So I wanted to be an actress, but I was always a big reader. I went to the library, I checked out books, I read all the time. And so when I got to college, I went to college in New York City, and I was a theater major. I started writing plays and poetry and all of that. And my first job was in publishing out at when I graduated from college. And so it was sort of there that I was like, you know what? I think I should give this thing a try. So it was sort of life. It was sort of the trajectory of my life without me really knowing that that was the direction I was going in.
That is so cool. I reacted that way because I was a theater major as well. And I did so many different things throughout my life, but my one constant has been reading and going to the library. So it's nice to meet a fellow theater major. We don't meet too many theater
Yeah,
majors.
I know. And now my youngest daughter is in high school, but she went to the performing arts high school. And at first I was sort of like, I want her to be more of a brainiac. But then I was like, girl, let her do, because if I had not had the opportunity to do it, then I wouldn't be here, right? You never know where theater is going to lead you. So it was a good experience. And so far she's having a good time at it.
That's awesome.
That's fabulous.
Do
Well,
you
I
want to
had a
ask the
question.
next question? Okay.
I'm sorry, Lisa.
I was just asking if you want to ask the next question or if you want me to read some comments.
Well, if you have some, go ahead, because I can see that they're streaming through. I just haven't been able to.
There's a lot. So much
Aw.
love about Reese Witherspoon and so well deserved.
Thank you.
Robin says, your characters have stayed with me long after the last page was turned. You deserve all your successes.
Thank you, Robin.
And Mindy says, I love listening to Sadeqa so much. She's so interesting and so eloquent.
Aw, thank you, Mindy.
And Susan says, I can't even imagine how excited you and your hubby must have been to be chosen by Reese, and so well deserved.
Thank you. Thank you.
They're coming in. I just wanted to share some of the love.
Yay. Oh, I always feel
And there
so
go the
loved and
hearts.
supported. Yeah. I always feel so loved and supported on the Friends in Fiction platform. So this book club is just an extension of that community. So I always feel like I'm right at home.
Well, thank
Oh.
you. That means so much to us. And I do want to say Kimberly Brock is watching live, and she says, I love Sadeqa Johnson. So happy to have her as a guest tonight.
Oh,
She's a
Kimberly is
previous
such
book
a
club, friend of the book
yes.
club as well.
And Kimberly is such a wonderful author. She and I met when I was in Atlanta, but not the suburbs of Atlanta. And we were doing an event together, and so she's lovely. So I'm glad that she's watching. Hey, Kimberly.
Yeah, she says hello.
Yay, Kimberly. Well, Sadeqa, before we get to the spoiler part, because we're getting close to that time, but we did want to ask you about the title of your book. We know that The House of Eve wasn't your original title, but could you talk about the original title and why it was changed?
Yeah. So my original title, my working title was Where the Bad Girls Go. And that title was born in my research because, in the book, there's a strong section of the book that talks about maternity homes. And when I was researching these maternity homes, these homes for unwed women, these girls went to have their babies. They were forced to give their babies up. They were referred to as bad girls, right? This is what the bad girls did. This is where the bad girls went. And so the title was Where the Bad Girls Go. Well, when it got to my editor, she said, are you really attached to the title? She's like, because it sounds like a thriller. It sounds like a YA book. She's like, I think we should look at some other titles. So we started this big Google Doc with like a gazillion possibilities of a title, and it just was not coming together. And then I would say almost to the point of publication, they came back with two titles and they said, what do you think about these two? Wayward Girls or The House of Eve? And I thought, well, The House of Eve has a little bit of a pop, and it's connected. It was already a small thread in the story when they came up with the title, but then I went back and I really zhuzhed it up a little bit. So it feels like it was always the title.
Love that. I love the title. I think that's amazing. It's interesting that they said it sounded like a YA novel. Like I would have never thought of that, but that's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
No, I could see that it would be a thriller, but I wouldn't have thought YA either.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's ask one more question before we get into, well, this is kind of a spoiler, but not really.
We're at spoiler time. So here's your spoiler warning. Okay. It's 7:15. So we're good to go.
Well, I just wanted to ask, I guess when I was reading this book, there are several, of course, big issues that struck me, that we'll talk about, but I didn't realize that in the 50s, adoption had such a stigma. It seemed like adoption and pregnancy were just swept under the rug and the women were just shamed. And it didn't really matter what the circumstances were, as illustrated in your book. The women were just shamed, and it was just a terrible thing. And I know there was the comment in your book that secrets keep you sick. Could you talk about that a little bit?
when I was researching the stories, the whole point of the maternity homes were to sort of keep this secret of these girls who had had sex outside of wedlock and got pregnant. And, there were plenty of people who did it, just everybody didn't get caught. And so the girls who got caught were the ones who were bad, right? And so they were sent away. And everything was a secret, right? So, everything was shame and secrecy. If you were not able to have a baby, there was a lot of shame and secrecy around that. And so people would adopt, but this was before, the story takes place before IVF. And having, they needed a place to get these babies from. And so these homes produced these children to give to these married couples so that they could adopt and have a baby as if, they had the babies themselves oftentimes.
Gotcha. Well,
Oh,
I
wow.
have a question that has been chomping at the bit for me. And one thing that I loved, I mean, there were so many things about this book that were great, but one detail for me that I thought was so interesting were the names of the chapters. Like chapter 1, Mommies and Dragons, chapter 4, Black Mecca, chapter 29, Slut, chapter 33, Secrets Girls Keep. And then there's chapter 34, which stuck with me, and I don't want to get emotional, Strange Fruit. So I have to say, when I saw that title, I was on the edge of my seat because I was like, oh no, what's going to happen? Is something bad going to happen? And when I shared that with Brenda, she wasn't aware of what strange fruit can refer to. So for those that aren't aware, when Black people were lynched and killed and they were hanging from trees in our history, in our country, they referred to those bodies as strange fruit. So when you wrote about that chapter and referring to it as Eleanor being introduced to an avocado, I thought, what a brilliant way to reclaim that phrase. And for me, moving forward, when I hear strange fruit, I will gladly think of an avocado instead of the ugly history behind that term. So thank you for that. But that was a long way around. My question is, did you know the chapter titles before you wrote each chapter, or did you go back and title it after it was written? And what made you name that chapter Strange Fruit?
For the reason that you said, I wanted to reclaim, sometimes we have to reclaim words and make them light and airy when they have such a heavy history. But also it was a strange fruit to Eleanor. And I eat avocados all the time. And I wasn't sure if it was a vegetable or a fruit. So I needed to look it up so that I could clarify for myself, But I thought that it was just, I like words because you can do multiple things with them. You can play with them, you can shift them. They have multiple meanings. And I thought that was, appropriate for that chapter. Some of the other chapters, like you mentioned slut, and right away, now I know which chapter that was. That was the chapter when Ruby was in the maternity home and Mother Margaret was calling them sluts and whores and all of the shameful things to get them to do what she wanted. And it sort of frames the chapter for the reader, but it also frames the chapter for me. Most times I write the chapter and then I pull something from the chapter to title it. So most times I write the chapter and then I write the title. But I would say when I'm writing the novel, that first quote in the beginning of the book, the Toni Morrison quote, so that first quote that starts off part 1, I need to have that before I start writing. It sort of shapes part 1 for me. So once I figure out what that opening quote is, then I'm ready to write. So it's sort of, all of these things sort of help shape what's happening for me as I move through the story. And then I hope you enjoy it as well.
Oh, I loved it. And I also eat avocados a lot. So I will totally think of that moving forward. And I cannot thank you enough for that. So That was one thing I was like, oh my gosh, I have to ask her.
Well, I'm going to dig in now, if that's okay, Lisa, to a topic that I also wasn't very aware of before your book, and that is the issue of colorism and how that affected people, I guess then and perhaps to some degree now. But we had a question from Edie Cohen, and she wants to know, she's wondering if colorism in the community is harder on females than males, as it seems to be in the book. Could you
Yes,
talk about that a little bit?
I would definitely say that it's harder on females, and Viola Davis speaks to it a lot. If you have not read her memoir, I think it's called Finding Me. She talks a lot about being a dark-skinned woman and wanting to be an actress and how she was perceived and the roles that were available to her in the beginning of her career, you know? And so definitely I would say it's a little bit harder for women than it is for men. Colorism is leftover baggage from slavery. And so if you have read Yellow Wife, you could sort of see the beginnings of what colorism looks like, right? And so we talk about Phoebe. Phoebe was the daughter of the master of the plantation. And so she and her mother, they had sort of a life that was closer to the house. They lived in a loom house. They worked in the house. Oftentimes the house slaves were light skinned. They were the children of the masters. And so they got that job. And those who worked in the field were a little bit darker. They had the jobs in the field. And so that was the way we were separated on plantations. And so when you move into, say, Reconstruction, the Reconstruction era, those families that were lighter skinned and they worked in the house, they may have had some relationship to the master. They had a easier time getting educated. They had an easier time buying a plot of land or getting a piece of land to get started. And so when we see colorism working in William's family, right? William says, we can trace our family back 3 generations. And so they can trace their families back to where this proximity to whiteness gave them privilege and continues to give them privilege as they move on. And so they don't want to mess that up, right? And so that is sort of leftover baggage from slavery that's now playing out in the 50s where the story takes place.
And yet with Ruby, Shimmy is white, and it's an absolute tragedy for her. It's so the dynamic, they're both facing racism, but it's totally different.
Yeah. And at the same time, right? Like it's happening at the very same time. And so for Ruby and Shimmy, Ruby being this poor Black girl from North Philadelphia, and Shimmy's family owning the building in which she lives in with her Aunt Marie, and being the hope of his family. His mother has very specific dreams and hope for him, specifically because his dad is an alcoholic and he's bringing the family's name down. All the hope is on her oldest child. And so for them to get into a relationship that was absolutely taboo in every respects of the way, and it's almost like your heart doesn't know any boundaries, but the world will continue to remind you what the boundaries are.
Well said. Wow.
I know, it's just like,
Lisa, I know that was very powerful, but
yeah, it's so powerful. It is.
Do you have any?
Yeah, Rhonda in the chat would like to know, from your research, did you find that any maternity homes treated the girls well?
Ooh, I did not come across happy stories within maternity homes. It could have been, they could have been. I'm not going to say that they weren't, but most of the stories that I read, the girls were treated pretty poorly. They were told that they were there to treat their psychotic problem, and psychotic problem being the pregnancy, that they were unfit to raise children, that if they tried to leave with the babies, they could be arrested. They were forced. Sometimes they were held down to sign the papers. And one home that I read about in California, the girls were not even given names. They were given numbers. Secrecy was everything. So I didn't come across a lot of homes or any homes really where they were treated well. Now, there were some homes where these girls had no other place to go. And so, I mean, I don't know if well would be the way to describe it, but maybe they had no other choice but to be there.
Okay.
So true.
Mhm.
Sadeqa, we have a book club member who is going to join us here for a moment and ask you some further questions. Hopefully our connection is good about your research on
Okay.
those maternity homes.
Hey,
Hey, Molly.
Hello,
Hi, Molly. How are you?
I am good. How
joined-
about you, Sadeqa? It's so good
I'm
to see you.
super. Same here.
Well, Molly, we were just, I mean, I think you were listening on the other tab, but we were just talking about some research on the maternity homes and whether Sadeqa had turned up any good treatment. You had a question about her research, and we wanted to bring that forward.
Okay, well, first, powerful book. Thank you. And just listening, get teary-eyed. But so first, what was the hardest part of your research? And then in addition to that, in particular, what was how did you go about conducting your research on the maternity homes? Like, what was that process? Things like that.
The hardest part of my research is always when I realize how bad women, Black people have been treated in history. That is always the hardest part. Reckoning with that, reliving it, because as I'm researching it, I'm actually reliving it. It's going through my body. I have to feel it in order to be able to write it. So that is always the, hardest part. I say that I bring my theater to my writing because I feel like a method actor. I turn my body over to my characters. And so, the scene, the hard scenes for you to read are the hard scenes that feel hard in my body. So I'm feeling it the way you're feeling it. And what was the second part of the question?
Just how'd you go about conducting the research on the maternity homes?
So on the maternity homes, I came across a book called The Girls Who Went Away by Ann Fessler. And in the book, she details over 100 stories of girls who went into these maternity homes and had their babies. And, she gives the backstory of, what happened to them, how they got pregnant, or what made them go to the home, if they wanted to give the baby away, that sort of thing. And so that was a good portion of my research. I also read a lot of online periodicals. There's a lot of articles. If you just put maternity homes in Google, there's a really good article that popped up from the Washington Post, another really good one from Washington City Paper, but it was not just here in America. One of the things that I found was here in America between 1943 and 1975, 1.5 million babies were surrendered in these homes. But when I look a little further, I found homes in Canada and also in Ireland. And so it was not just here in the United States, but I had to sort of put blinders on so that I wouldn't slip down that research rabbit hole and really keep my focus on what was happening here in our country.
Wow. Thank you. I'm adopted too, by the way, so it's even more crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you so much, Molly. We appreciate your
Thank
question.
you, ladies. Thank you.
Take care.
Thanks for
too.
joining us all the way from
Of course.
Utah.
Utah, yes.
Okay. So, she's so sweet. I'm so glad she
I know.
joined us. So, we have a question from a book club member, Hannah, and she would like to know, well, actually, I have to preface by saying we've had tons of questions about this, but we're gonna highlight Hannah's. Would you consider writing a sequel to further explore Ruby's life as well as William, Eleanor, and the baby, and how their paths intersect and move forward?
Wow.
She would like a sequel along with we've had so many people
1,000 other
suggest about
Other
sequels.
people.
And then I was like, well, maybe she can do a novella for like each little character and have little spin-offs.
Look at Lisa giving you all this additional.
I know. I'm gonna have Lisa come over and sit in my office and write some of these little novellas for me.
I have not been able to get some of the characters out of my head, and that's the consensus. We want more.
Oh, that makes me so happy, and I'm so grateful for that. So I will say I have never written a sequel, but I always leave strings and threads so that I can connect books or pull when I need to. I do have another idea for a novel that I think you're gonna like. I mean, it's another historical. It's about a woman who not many people have heard of, and I think that she needs her just due. And I'm going to highlight some of the themes that you all love, and you never know. You may get something, you may not. I don't know yet. So we shall see. We shall see.
It has got to be a hard decision. Like, you've published the book and moved on, except you're doing all the, talking about it. But then we've just read it and we're like, we want to know.
I know. And, I would say the writing as a writer, it does not just drip off the edge of my pen. Like, I have to sit with and I have to redo it. And, it's a process. So I definitely appreciate when people say, oh my gosh, I read your book in one sitting. And I'm like, that's wonderful. That means it was a page turner, but you're going to have to wait a while for the next book. So savor it if you can. It's going to take me a little while, or go back and read some of my backlist titles. This is my 5th novel. So occupy yourself with my 1st, 2nd, and 3rd novel while you're waiting.
That's what we all need to do.
Oh, absolutely. And I have to say, you said you like to leave strings and trails or something to that effect. And that's exactly, I was thinking, oh my goodness, this is a big flag going, like when because we are spoiler free, when Eleanor meets Ruby in William's office, I think it was, and that exchange between them, I was like, I want to know, like, what's going on in Ruby's head. And that was a big thing for me. Like, is Ruby happy?
I get that.
How did she turn out? Because there was kind of a hint that maybe not, but then I don't know. Well, you wouldn't want to elaborate any, would you?
Yeah, well, I'll say this. If you remember, towards the end of the book, my favorite line in the whole book is when, I probably have more than one favorite line, but this one really touches me pretty deeply. When Ruby says, I can be unhappy, but I cannot be poor, right? She says, I can be unhappy, but I cannot be poor. And so poor is a very motivating factor for everything that Ruby does and the sacrifices that she makes in the story. And so when I was writing the epilogue, my first epilogue was actually in Wilhelmina's voice. And I had written that whole scene from Wilhelmina's perspective. And when my agents read it, they said, but we never get to see Eleanor and Ruby in the same scene. It was just a Wilhelmina's voice, and it was just Wilhelmina and Eleanor. And so the suggestion was, what if you put it in Eleanor's voice, see what happens? So I went back and I rewrote the epilogue in Eleanor's voice, and then I was able to carry her to the hospital. And then I thought, oh, this is perfect. Now her and Ruby will finally get to meet, but it'll tie things up, but it won't be that super duper neat bow, right? It was like the artwork sort of pulled Ruby in, and we all felt that, like, oh my gosh, that's her daughter's artwork, and she was a painter, and so we could feel that. But if you remember, when Eleanor and Ruby shook hands, Eleanor said the woman smiled, but it never quite reached her eyes.
And that's exactly it.
And that was what I was feeling about Ruby. So what Ruby is feeling past that moment, I hate to disappoint you, but I do not know. That's as far as I went. That was as far as I went.
I'll try to get over it.
While Brenda's collecting herself, I have a question from the chat. Debbie would like to know, are there any parts of the House of Eve that you had to edit out that you'd like us to know about or that you can share with us?
That I had to
Mm.
edit out.
Or something you
No,
had to take out?
no, there was nothing I had to take out, but I will tell you what there was a little push and pull between me and my editors. Was over Eleanor's secret, right? So we knew, and I knew going into the story that Eleanor had had a miscarriage previously before the book started, right? Like I knew that. But the way to develop that secret and let it happen in the story, my editors and I sort of were not completely on the same page. They thought that I should not have William find out at the hospital. They thought it was too much, like that was overwhelming for William to find out at the hospital.
Gotcha.
They wanted the doctor to sort of cover up for Eleanor and for the secret to continue to eat Eleanor up when she got back home, which added to that isolation, which added to her thinking like, what's going on with William? Is he cheating on me? All of that, because she's holding on to the secret. And so I just didn't agree. Like I felt like that scene was so powerful to like,
Mhm.
for us all to find out at the same time. Like
Yeah.
Eleanor was the only one, me and Eleanor were the only ones who knew about the secret, right? But like everybody found out at the same time. And I just thought like, whoa, no, I don't think I can change that. And I'm really glad I did. And I think you probably like that scene too.
I definitely love the way that that played out because that was an aha, that was a OMG moment for sure. Because, and then I feel like that's how it would have played out because the doctor doesn't know what William knows or not. And, it's her husband, the baby, and that's her medical record. I feel like that was the natural way, and having the doctor cover it up, that's a little, especially in those days, maybe it would have been a little
Yeah, and
tougher
that
to
was one
believe.
of the things I thought in the 50s, the man doctor is not taking the females. This is when we were
Amen.
Mr. and Mrs. Glenn Johnson, right? And so
Right.
I don't even get a name in the 50s. I'm Mr. and
Yeah.
Mrs. Glenn Johnson. So I just didn't think that the doctor would cover up for Eleanor. And I love the shock factor of everybody finding out at the same time.
Yes. That's amazing. People in the chat are still talking about novellas and sequels. And there's one character I want to bring up that I would like to know more about too, and that's Bubbles. What happened to Bubbles?
Yes. So Bubbles, I love Bubbles. She was Bubbles from the beginning. Soon as she came on, like the very first, like the first scene that you all see of Bubbles is the first one that popped in my mind. And so a few
Wow.
tweaks, but really that was how she came. Smoking the fake, faking the smoke of the cigarette, little sassy, knew what she wanted. That was the way she came to me. And I want to say that I think that Bubbles got her happily ever after. We're gonna go with that. I know you guys like that good
Yeah.
feeling. We'll go with that. She got her happily ever after. I don't think her
Yeah.
parents
Well,
were too happy about it, but
Yay. Well, talking about Bubbles makes me think about a lot of the other characters. And I was curious, was one character harder to write than the other? Did you struggle? Well, any character, but really, was Ruby harder to write or Eleanor? Or
I feel like I had the most access to Ruby because Ruby came first. And, as I mentioned in my author's note, Ruby was sort of a character that I was thinking about while also thinking about my own family history. And my mother's family is from North Philadelphia. My grandmother said that she was the black sheep of our family because she got pregnant out of wedlock with my mom, had her at 15, couldn't get married because my grandfather was this is where the colorism comes in. My grandfather was very light skinned. My grandmother was mahogany brown, and like oil and water, they were not intended to mix. And so in thinking about my own family and Philadelphia and Ruby being this young girl in danger and remembering, like I remember when I was a kid walking through the streets in North Philadelphia, and I have an aunt that's like 6 years older than me. And she's very well endowed, right? So she has like a nice little hips and big old booty. And so we're walking down the street and grown men would catcall her, right? And I just thought like,
Mhm.
wow, like, and I was like maybe 10 and she was 16, and I'm talking about 30-year-olds, right? Cat calling her on the street. And so I remember that. And so that sort of made its way into Ruby's story. So I had more access to Ruby because of my
Mhm.
own family ties, where Eleanor sort of came a little bit later in my idea of making the story. She was sort of born out of, how do I make this a Black woman story? Because when I was researching these maternity homes, most of them, the majority of them were for white women, because during this time, white babies were the commodity. And I thought, well, that couldn't be the end of the story. You know, like there's all these different ways to tell a story. There has to be another way. And so when Eleanor sort of appeared in my office and she came and she was, you know, feeling like, I could just feel this sense of like anger and resentment and rage and desperation. And, you know, she says, I need your help. I need to have a baby. And so I thought, well, wow, what can I do with her? Like, how does this work? But there was some distance between us, right? And so if you notice, I wrote Ruby in first person so that you could sort of walk through the story as if you are Ruby. Whereas Eleanor, she's in third person. There's a little bit of space in her, there's a breath there. And that sort of is how they came to me.
You know,
That's amazing.
I don't think that was a conscious realization on my part, but that makes total sense.
Yeah,
Oh my goodness, that's fascinating. And
I
it's
know.
fascinating to me how Eleanor just shows up in your office and you start working on her. Well, I would like to turn the attention a little bit to the men of this story, but it also includes the women. But they, you know, the men were good people in the story, I feel like. But taking William first, he was the upper class, you know, African American at a time when that wasn't the norm, of course. And Shimmy was white and Jewish. We talked a little bit about him earlier. But the relationships between, you know, Shimmy and Ruby and William and Eleanor, they seemed fitting. We, at least as a reader, you know, I loved both of their relationships, but you know, interracial relationships of whichever kind weren't accepted. So what was the inspiration behind each of their relationships, especially with Shimmy being white and Jewish?
I just knew that when I thought about my own family, you know, I thought of making Ruby's love interest just very light skinned and not someone who she could date. And I was telling my teenage daughter, one day I picked her up from school and I'm still working the story out in my head. And so since I'm like in my office, I'm by myself, when I can talk it out, you know, and I can talk it out to my teenagers, I will. And she says, "Oh no, mommy, you need to make her love interest Italian. Up the ante a little bit." And then I thought, well, okay. I was like, all right, let me look into this. But when I look into the geography of Philadelphia, my father's family is from South Philly. My mother's family is from North Philly. And so I knew in South Philadelphia, if I was writing about that, I could make him Italian. But in North Philadelphia, I found that Jewish people and African Americans lived in very close proximities. And so through the exchange of goods and commerce, they interacted. So it made sense that if I was going to up the ante, that he would be a white Jewish boy, because that was who she would run into.
You know, that's what I love.
Them. Yeah, sorry.
I know. Oh no, I'm sorry, Lisa. Sometimes there's a delay. I just love the way fiction can tell the truth, or I'll go with truth. The truth better than nonfiction in so many ways, because you can do that research and add it to your book, and it's so impactful. You know, in a way that you know, the facts just can't be. So
yeah,
that's not really a question, I realize.
Yes. Well, that is always my goal. I will say, when I am writing historical fiction, I'm like, I always think of it as, you know, when I'm sneaking like spinach into the spaghetti so the kids don't know that I'm giving them vegetables, right? Because I want it to be healthy. Well, I'm sneaking these historical facts, this truth, while I'm entertaining you at the same time. And so that's sort of my aim and my goal, is to make learning about history entertaining and fun, but also you walk away knowing something that you would have not known.
And that's what I love about historical fiction. It's just so powerful.
And
Lisa,
your
do you have?
research is so
Go ahead.
meticulous. Your research is so meticulous. That's why your writing is just so beautiful. There's so many comments in the chat about, after you mentioned reading it in one sitting, like we had several people say, I read this in one sitting. I read The Yellow Wife in one sitting too. Like, there's so much love. I wish I could read everything to you, but there was one question, a follow-up question that came up when you answered Molly's question about taking in the feelings and feeling your characters and using your body to really go through that so that you can write it. The follow-up question in the chat was, how do you shake that off? Like, how do you hang that up and just go back to Sadeqa and, leave it? Because it's not like like a 9 to 5, you clock in and clock out. That sticks with you,
Yeah, it
So
does.
how do you do
Well,
that?
So when I was writing, I'll talk about this book because it was, it's different for Yellow Wife, which was different because that was just a lot of darkness, right? And there is some light. There is a lot more light in the House of Eve. But I'll say particularly the hardest scene for me to write the hardest scenes, and I think I touched on it earlier, but was Eleanor's miscarriage scenes were really, like, as a woman, right? I could feel her pain. But the hardest scene was Ruby's birth scene. I mean, that was hands down the most difficult scene that I wrote in that book. And I remember I was sitting on my sun porch and I was writing it. So the weather was nice. And I just pushed through. I was uncomfortable. It hurt everything in my body. And I just pushed through, wrote the scene. And then when I got to the end, I texted my agent. I said, I just finished Ruby's birth scene. I can't handle it. I have to go to bed. It was 2:00 in the afternoon. I closed my computer. I went upstairs, and not only did I get in the bed, and I remember this feeling, it was like I needed to crawl back into the womb, right? So my blankets became like a safe place for me to sort of pull myself back together, So that was that one particular scene. When I was writing Yellow Wife, I would write every day until maybe like 2 or 3 o'clock. And then I would go for a run or a hike or do something very rigorous with my body to sort of get the story out, so that after I came back, took a shower, had a little snack, now I can focus on the question that all moms know is the most popular one in the house: Mommy, what's for dinner? And so I could be present for that. So that was how I sort of took care of myself. And I do try and take off the weekends so that I could sort of regroup and be fresh for Mondays.
Wow. That's amazing. And we thank you so much for giving so much of yourself to tell these wonderful stories.
Oh, thank you.
I know I'm still a little kind of stricken by the Ruby birth story.
Yeah.
Oh, I can only imagine. But it sounds like you have a great routine. Did it change from book to book, your writing routine?
For the House of Eve, it's the first book that I actually realized I needed to leave my house a little bit, like leave my family, so that I could get into the nitty-gritty of the story. So, at some point I realized I need to go away for like a week every month or every other month, where I'm just solely focused on the business of writing and I'm not thinking about anything else. So that was different for this book. And I think I'm probably going to do, actually, I already booked a week in May where I'm going to do that for the book that's in my head, so that I could get that going. Because, if you're reading a book in one sitting, I better get to it.
Well, Lisa's going to come over and help you write those novellas.
Yeah.
Hey, if you ever need me, I'm here.
All right. I might take you up on that.
Well, speaking of what's in your head, is there anything you can tell us on what you're currently working on?
I mean, I can
She's
just say that it's historical. It's historical fiction. I believe right now it's going to start in I think it starts in 1948. It may be, I've not done this before, so I do try and challenge myself. So House of Eve is the first time that I've written 2 voices every other chapter, and it's the first time I did 4 parts. I always do 3 parts. First time I did 4 parts. First time I did first person and third person. So with this book, this is a challenge that I am really afraid of, but I almost feel like I want to write a little bit in dual timeline. So I know it starts in the late 40s, early 50s, but I also feel like I might want to talk a little bit about the late 60s. And I'm not quite sure how that all works. But there is a real person at the center of the story that I'm going to create fiction around and give you all of the isms and all of the things that you like that I do. You will get that in the story as well.
Well, we can't ask for more than that, can we?
Yay. We can't wait for that.
I know, right?
So
Sadeqa, go ahead.
Oh, you, me and Brenda, we're both we're just been so excited. We're like, I can't believe we only have 7 minutes left. So we want to make sure that you can share any events that you have coming up that our members might be able to see you. And usually we like to ask the events that I have coming up. And a big thing that our members always want to know is, where can they get a signed book?
Ooh, well, I've done the bulk of my tour. I was on tour for a full 6 weeks. So if you go to my website, sadequajohnson.net, it'll show you all of my past events as well as the ones I have coming up. And if there is a past event, they probably do have a signed copy. So definitely take a look at that. This Saturday, I'm going to be in Charlottesville, Virginia at the Virginia Festival of the Books. And I believe I speak at 12:30. So if there's any readers in Virginia, come check me out. Next week, I'm going to be in Rhode Island at Curiosity and Co. I believe that's March 29th. That is a ticketed event, so you will have to get a ticket. In April, I'm going to be at the Los Angeles Book Festival. I'm so excited. It's my very first invitation. And I'm going to be in conversation with Kristen Hanna. Pinch me. Okay. Pinch
that's so
me.
awesome.
I'm so excited about that.
We'll have to see if they have a virtual. Sometimes they have virtual tickets for some of those talks, so we can watch you. We'll have to see if that's an option.
Yes, if they do, I'll make sure it's on my website. But you could find everything at sadequajohnson.net. I think my husband even got a little fancy. He does my website. He's my web designer. He may have made it where you can go. Yeah, I think you can go sadeqa.net. He's going for that Oprah feel, like Oprah.com. So I think you can find me if you put in sadeqa.net. Yeah, share. Exactly. I think you'll find me that way as well. And you could always find me on Instagram. I'm Sadeqa Says. Of course, I'm on Facebook, and I'm a friend of Friends in Fiction.
Yay, we love it.
We are so glad you are. Well, before we let you go, Sadeqa, and it has been just such a pleasure, would you mind sharing some interesting things you've been reading?
Yes, and I read ahead. So I have read The Secret Book of Flora Lee. I loved it. I have read The Paris Daughter by Kristen Harmel. I loved it. Right now, I am reading The First Ladies by Marie Benedict and Victoria Christopher Murray. It needs to be required reading. When we talked earlier about history, it's so easy to learn in this way. If our kids read The First Ladies, it to me is life-changing. So I'm reading that. I'm listening to Lessons in Chemistry. So that's what's on my plate. And then I have a few books down the pike. Next, I'm going to read Queen of Exile by Vanessa Riley. That's next on my list. And then I don't know the name of it, but Christine Pride and Joe Piazza I'm also their next book. I have that as well
wow.
in the queue to read. So I read ahead and then I listen to what's current.
I love
Oh,
that. That's a good strategy.
Mhm. Otherwise, I wouldn't even get to read. I wouldn't get to read the books that are current because I'm always asked to blur books and read books
Yeah,
ahead. And so that's the only way I get to read what's going on. And that's how I started with audiobooks.
that's
oh,
awesome.
well, yeah, those are some great books too. I'm looking forward to reading several of those. One of the dangers of Friends in Fiction and the Friends in Fiction book club is the recommendations and how there are so many great choices out there. So,
Mhm.
I, we all have a little bit of an addiction problem with books,
Yeah,
so
that's a
it
good
gets to be
addiction, though.
challenging.
That's a good ism to have.
Yeah.
I have to say yes. If you have to have a vice, that's it.
Mm.
Sadeqa, it has been such a delight to have you tonight and talk about the House of Eve and really dig into it, because I've been so wanting to discuss some of these points. Oh, and yes, and I will hold up the book. If you're still with us and you haven't read this book yet, well, now you know everything, but you need to read it anyway. But
It's
thanks
been
so much for joining us
great.
tonight. I can't believe our hour passed so quickly.
Oh my
Yeah,
gosh.
time flies when you're having fun, right, Brenda?
That's so right. Thank you so much. And we just look forward to even more.
Thank you. And
Yes.
thank you both. Thank you, Brenda. Thank you, Lisa, for doing this. You don't know how wonderful it is to talk about a book that you've been by yourself with for, a year and a half, and then to be able to talk it through and it's just wonderful. So thank you for what you're doing for me and for all authors. We all are very appreciative of book clubs like this. So thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. Have a wonderful night.
All right. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Have a good
Good
night. Bye
night.
bye.
Oh my goodness. She's a
Oh, that
journey.
was fabulous. I know. I know.
I was
Totally.
literally shaking. I was trying so hard not to cry. The
I
strange
could tell
fruit.
you were.
My hands, like you can't see my hands. They were like this. Because we're in the after show. I can be honest with you guys, right? I have
Yes.
practiced that. I never practice questions in advance that I have. Never. See, look. I can't even. I tried 3
Oh,
times today. I did not want to cry in front of Sadiqa. I tried 3 times to get that question out, just practicing in this every single time. Every time.
oh. But Lisa, you got it out. And I think what you said and what the gift Sadiqa gave in that book, in that section, was to be able to reframe that terrible thing, you know, to be a good thing. And that's all I really, I,
Normally, I
it
would be
just
turning my
never.
camera off, but I'm just going to keep it real with you guys.
Oh,
Okay.
well, this is
How
where
about
virtual stinks, because I would like to give you a hug, but I can't. You're getting some hugs in the chat.
that looks really creepy when you it looks like Frankenstein's
I
coming
know
for you.
it does. But just
Oh
think
my,
avocado.
for sure. Okay, so on to
Secret.
other things. What are you currently reading since we finished House of Eve? What are you reading right now?
Oh, well, I finished my first cozy mystery, the Live and Let Chai.
Uh-huh.
And oh my gosh, what is the title of the book? I'm actually doing 2 ebooks right now. And you're gonna have
Look
to
at
you're gonna have to
you.
share what you're reading, because I have to think of the titles.
I am currently reading The Bodyguard by Catherine Center, and I gotta tell you, it is so cute. I'm maybe a fourth into it. I just started it yesterday. And I'm loving it. So that's what I'm reading right now.
Cool.
Yep.
That's funny. I pulled up my Kindle and I'm reading The House of Eve, but no, I'm not. I'm reading it in both. That's funny.
Such a powerful
You know,
book.
I have to confess, and I don't know if anybody else has this problem, but when I'm reading ebooks, it might be from Libby, it might be from Hoopla, it might be from Kindle, and I get so confused. I have to figure out a better system because I'm getting lost.
I will do one on the ebook, one audio, and one physical book. And even though I have more books than I can ever read, physically, those Kindle deals get me, man. I will have a book that I have the physical, and then I'll buy the Kindle anyway. I'm like, well, if I lose the book or whatever. So I'm reading The Bodyguard, and then up next is that I want to read is the Banned Bookshop of Maggie Banks.
Oh my gosh, Lisa, that's it.
That's what you're
That's
reading?
that's
Oh
what I'm
my
reading.
God. PB&J always connected.
That's the one. And you know what? I'm not even right about the ebooks. I'm reading the Banned Bookshop of Maggie Banks by ebook, but now I can't even distinguish because my physical book is Nora Goes Off Script.
Oh, okay. Did you just buy the Banned Bookshop like yesterday for the Kindle deal?
No, I've had it for a few days.
Oh, I just bought it. That is so funny. Well, you guys, Patty called us PB&J for a reason, so here we are.
I know, right? And the funny thing is, I couldn't think of it, and then as soon as you said that, that's it. Well, I wanted to make sure everybody was aware of our next book club discussion, because it is going to be awesome as well. April 17th, and I don't have my hard copy at the ready, but Colleen Oakley and the Mostly True Story of Tanner and Louise.
Yay, my
Very
neighbor.
excited about that. Oh, that's right. Everybody's your neighbor.
Well, we have the same zip code neighbor. Like she lives well, I don't know exactly where she lives, but she lives in the same town. And I will see her on Saturday. I believe this Saturday. She's having a big launch party in Atlanta. It's in Smyrna where we live. So if you live in Atlanta, check out her website to buy a ticket to the launch party. It's going to be so much fun.
Now, see, you're jelly, but now I'm jelly.
Don't be jelly. I don't think you're ready for this jelly.
Okay, I think it might be time to
I'm done. I'm emotionally spent. I've made a fool of myself. I've cried. No, I didn't make a fool of myself. I was honest.
No, you did not.
I,
maybe with the singing. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, the singing. That's when it's done. I can't sing. This lives forever. What have I done?
Well, I'm very excited to put that one back up on display on my shelf. Well, I hope you guys have been.
We get to ask her about the cover.
We never get to everything.
I know. We were going to ask her about the cover, and was it, who was it, and was it the school, like college behind, or was that the maternity home? That just means we'll have. Yeah.
What do you guys who are still watching think? Lisa, recap who the contenders are for who's on the cover.
Well, we were wondering if it was the college on the back of it. Let me pull it up. Is that the maternity home behind her on the cover? Or was that the college?
And
was it Eleanor? Is it, who is it? And where were they going? See, the suitcase was the key for me. So I felt like it was like she was on her way to pick up her baby. Maybe.
I thought about that too, but then
she's well dressed.
Yeah, that's probably it. But it could be Ruby going to college.
Right. This could be
Is it
Howard.
Eleanor? Is it Eleanor picking up her baby, or is it Eleanor going to Howard? So I don't know. Let's see.
Yeah. With the pearl, I didn't know. But
Hannah says Eleanor in the hospital. Karen says Eleanor moving to William. So I guess we will have to bring Sadeqa back to answer that question.
I know. Another mystery.
Since we didn't get to that one. But that was so much fun. Lisa, you were an awesome co-host, and thanks so much. Thanks everybody, book club
You are
members, for the
too.
wonderful questions. And see you April 17th for Colleen Oakley.
Yay.
Happy reading.
Thanks everyone. PB and J.
Thanks. Good.